Hi.
Hi. So we give the participants a few minutes to arrive.
Perfect. That's excellent.
Okay. I will try something super new before we start the session, which is
Okay.
change my virtual background.
Okay, sounds good.
Is it the right side?
Yeah, looks good.
Cool. So
Very official.
So while we're
Hi, Isabel.
yeah. Hi, Isabel. While we're awaiting everybody to join, Michelle, if you have any questions regarding any questions to our audience that we can answer in the meantime using the chat, super free or super welcome to ask.
Awesome. I'd love to hear where people are joining us from today, and maybe just a quick word about how you're feeling. What's your internal weather like right now? Nice. John from Manila, Austin, Stuttgart, Zurich. Yes. Great. Let's see. Motivated, Berlin, Nairobi. Wow. A little sleepy. Bern. I love Bern. Bern is gorgeous. Buffalo. Nice. 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 Wonderful. Looking forward to learning from you all too. Great. Yep, I turn it over to you for whenever you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I would say let's give it another 2 minutes.
Okay, sure.
People.
I just happen to be on time for a change. It's excellent.
Yeah. While people, like some late.
Oh, midnight. Sorry. We'll try to keep it interesting for you. Yeah, I always know when I've had too much coffee, when I'm kind of like fuzzy. So I don't always drink coffee. I'm usually a tea drinker, but nice.
Yeah, thank you for staying awake super long just to join our session.
Yeah, very sweet. Nice. Wow, really global audience. Nice. Nice. Mm.
Okay. We can just take another minute, follow the breathing, connect to where we're sitting while we're waiting for a few latecomers to join. Okay, I think we're ready to get started, Michelle. We're live on Facebook as well. So welcome everybody to Unit Masters. This is our live session 6. We are in week 3 of the program, and our program is dedicated to train the entrepreneurs of the future. And one very important part of entrepreneurship of the future as we see it is well-being. So we have with us today an expert for well-being, for emotional intelligence, and also for leadership. And Michelle is the co-founder of Goleman Emotional Intelligence Institute based out of US. She's a leader herself with more than 25 years in different executive management positions. She's also a co-founder of a higher education institute for Buddhist philosophy in Nepal, and so many more things. So I feel very blessed to have you with us today and share about your story as an entrepreneur and also the insights that you had from your more than 25 years of work in the domain of emotional intelligence and leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yip. So great to be here with you all today. And I have some slides that I've prepared. I'm big into visuals because a lot of us are on these types of calls a lot. And so I kind of like and enjoy the images to go with the story. So thank you for having me today. So this is not a typical presentation for me that I've prepared, in so much as that it's very personal. And that's what I think was the call to action for me. And I had a really fun time thinking about, you know, the core of my journey to share with you and sort of the highlights. And I want to make sure that we have enough time to answer all your questions and to have it be an interactive session. So I'll keep my bit to a minimum at the very beginning, and then we can dive in from there. So I have been doing a lot of thinking really over the last, I'm almost 50. I'm jumping the gun a little. I turned 48 this year in, I guess, a few weeks. And so when I think about like, why, you know, why am I here? Why are we here? This has been sort of that central question for me from the time I was quite little. I kind of came into this world, I feel like totally ready to go. Like, let's get this show on the road. And I've always been sort of in a rush and, you know, kind of like, let's get the requisite learning out of the way so we can get to the good stuff, you know, and that's just my nature. It's sort of how I came to this planet. So, so for me, from a very early age, I had been asking that question that I think a lot of us come into the world asking, which is, you know, what is this whole thing about? You know, why am I here? And what is it that I'm supposed to take away from my journey? And so what I can say about my journey is that from a very young age, I was fascinated with India. And I even wrote stories, I guess, about India. I was born in Wyoming, which is the middle of nowhere, essentially, in the US. Actually, the picture behind me is from Wyoming. And so when I was 20, I ended up going to India on a Buddhist studies program. And this is a picture of the academic program I went on through Antioch College. And I hadn't studied anything about Buddhism. I'd never meditated even. I just thought, oh, I'd like to go to India. So the way the program was structured is we studied the three main schools of Buddhism and the meditation techniques of each, and then had short retreats that we, you know, were then able to sort of delve deep into those techniques. And I loved it. It was fantastic. It's where I met my teacher. I particularly felt resonance with the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And so when I graduated from university, I had studied religion at Bryn Mawr College, which is a very small women's liberal arts college based out of Philly. And so I knew that I wanted to study meditation mainly and Buddhist philosophy. But at that time, you really couldn't do that very easily without knowing Tibetan. And so while I had started to learn Tibetan at UPenn as an undergrad, which is a whole story in and of itself, I wasn't fluent. And so there were a group of us, about 13 of us at that time, who were there for roughly the same purposes. And so because there wasn't a forum to learn, we said, okay, we're gonna start a university. So we did. And this is the very first group, this picture of Rangjung Yeshe Institute. And Rangjung Yeshe in Tibetan means self-existing wakefulness. And so I would say that that aptly captures, that element that I myself have been so curious about. And so my life's journey has always circled around this question of why are we who we are? And where is it that we have agency amongst a sea of things that it seems like we don't actually have much control over? And so I found myself circling these same kind of issues throughout my life around what is that unchanging wisdom that we have within ourselves, which is both life-giving, which is the basis for our ability to have volition in any given moment, what it is that we can actually control, and from which all of our positive qualities emerge. And for me, in this case, I am Buddhist. I've been trying to practice Buddhism now since I was 20. Is for the purpose of benefiting all beings. For me, that intention is very important, with all that I do, including GolemanEI, which really has come about with the desire for the ability to apply emotional intelligence in more than just a conceptual way. So when I think about kind of what was that moment for me that was so poignant, and for me it was meeting my teacher, and his name is Chokanima Rinpoche. He is based out of Nepal, originally obviously from Tibet. And here are three of my favorite quotes, and I think this kind of sums up what my life's work has been about and what it is I try to do on a personal level. So I'll read them, and then I'd love to entertain some questions and before I move forward in what I have to say. So keep your view higher than the sky and your actions finer than flower. For me, that's sort of this idea that everything counts, it turns out. Like, I'm somebody who believes that it's not like only some things count, everything counts. So you better make it count. So I've tried, I've certainly tried. And then nothing in the world, I love this quote so much, nothing in the world can bother you as much as your own mind. In fact, others seem to be bothering you, but it's not others, it is your own mind. And so this is sort of this idea that's this, how are we habitually processing our experience? Both in terms of what we perceive, what we place and hold our attention on, as well as what are those habits of mind that we use to make sense of our day-to-day realities, which as entrepreneurs is critical, right? Because it presumably is influencing what is it that you're choosing to be an entrepreneur for and with, and for what intent, right? And if you don't know yourself and if you can't answer those questions, that's where it all begins. Why am I doing this? To what end? What purpose? And then I like this quote too. Happiness comes down to choosing between the discomfort of becoming aware of your mental afflictions and the discomfort of being ruled by them. And that's sort of that inflection point of what is it that we can develop within ourselves by way of self-awareness and the ability to recover from adversity or a setback that allows us to move forward, sometimes against what feels like all odds. So I'll pause, see if folks have any questions before I move forward. Yip, or anybody, I invite anybody to ask.
Yeah, of course, everybody can just use the chat to write the
Great.
question or raise your hands if you have any comments so far. Maybe Michele, what is your definition of emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So for me, there's a traditional definition of emotional intelligence, and it's being aware of your own emotions and their impact on yourself and others. But, emotional intelligence is a really broad concept, actually. And if we kind of break it down for me into its core components, I have here a slide here in the deck that kind of captures the essence of what I think is most important, and that is three things. It's self-awareness, the ability, there are many types of ways to be aware, by the way, even self-aware, many different types of ways, which I'm happy to talk about more if that's of interest. But that self-awareness, that ability to know what's happening with me at any given point, what's my impact on myself and others. What I like to term emotional balance, which is three things, right? It's how quickly and easily am I triggered? How badly am I triggered when I get triggered, and how quickly can I recover? So those three elements of emotional balance really matter. If you don't have sort of some capacity to be aware of those things and respond in ways in which you're recovering to adversity, then your ability to self-manage is minimal, right? And that's a problem, it turns out, because it means our decision quality won't be what it needs to be, or that when we encounter obstacles, we will not necessarily be at our best. And then finally, compassion. And I think about compassion as our ability to connect with each other, and more than just sort of that on an intellectual level, but sort of on that heartfelt, I can't help but bring myself to doing something. Like, I think for me, it's that uncontrollable urge to act on behalf of another, and to be able to care just as much about someone you don't know as somebody you do know. That's hard. It turns out that's hard. That's not easy. That takes practice, it turns out, because it's so much easier to care about the people who are our family members or our friends or who we like or who like us back, right? Much harder to care about the people we don't know, the people we actively disagree with, and or the people we are, maybe even enemies with, right? So anyway, so those are the three elements for me of emotional intelligence that matter most for our agency.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Okay. I'm trying to see the chat questions here. Yep, I might need your help. Oh, yeah. Okay.
We normally have different definitions of happiness. What is your definition of happiness?
Well, I kind of think of happiness on two levels. I think about it on a relative level, that is, on a worldly level, what would momentarily give me joy. I think happiness is something that is best to be intrinsic to oneself. Otherwise, it's pretty bumpy. If your happiness is dependent on outer circumstances or on somebody saying or doing that thing, then that's kind of iffy happiness. That's kind of like that's not so stable. And sorry, my headset is stealing my my iPhone is stealing my headset. Bear with me. And then there's the kind of happiness that I would think of as ultimate happiness. And this is sort of the happiness that is beyond the vicissitudes of life, beyond the kind of short-term gains or joys that we think of associated with happiness. It's a sort of unchanging happiness that is constant, and it's based in what is intrinsically available to us, and in this case, our own awareness, the nature of our own mind. And to be able to connect with that sort of wakeful, unchanging capacity to, we're just ready to perceive everything, right? And that ability is always with us. It's just that we forget it is. But that's our source of wisdom, and it's always with us.
Thanks. I think we can move on. And you have a practice also with the United Nations you mentioned, right? So we will experience all of this.
I did. Yeah, I did. So this was just a little bit of background about me. I have 2 degrees. I had 2 marriages, involved in 3 startups, 4 kids. I speak 4 languages, lived in 5 countries. I'm pretty active on the boards of 5 different meditation centers, all over the world. I've had 6 life-saving surgeries. I've worked for 10 companies, and I've been alive almost 10 decades. These are some of the companies I've worked at, in order, actually, from left to right and then down below. And so GolemanEI was founded just about a year ago, actually, in conjunction with an event at the World Economic Forum in New York, Digital Intelligence Day. We are a partner for that particular effort that is sponsored by the World Economic Forum. And our mission is simple. It's to democratize EI, to democratize it in a way in which it can be applied and not just conceptualized, and for the purpose of benefiting all beings. And this particular, I don't know what we would call it really, but there's a word, it's just eluding me. I found this that day on the street in New York City, and I saw something kind of, sparkly. So I leaned down to pick it up, and it was Guanyin. So anyway, I had an opportunity in 2019, along with Daniel Goleman and a number of other people here that you see, to speak at the United Nations. It was the first emotional intelligence event that the United Nations had ever hosted. It was quite exciting. It was a really amazing event. And the gentleman on the left, Fernando, very left, now works for GolemanEI, but he's the one who organized this event at the UN as an intern. I already mentioned the World Economic Forum. We had a chance to speak there when we launched GolemanEI. And finally, we had a quick interview, hour-long panel interview about the intersection of AI and emotional intelligence, which I think is actually a pretty big deal. I don't mean the interview, but the topic. And so these are ways in which our understanding of our own emotions can be quite vital for the technology that's happening today, and is a topic that we're very much interested in being engaged with. So I'm going to share with you just sort of the heart of what I see my work shaping out to be now. And I refer to it as the value stream of perception leading to reaction, okay? And we think about, okay, where is it that we do have agency? I'm a very practical person, so I like to not just think about theories. I like to think, well, how do we actually apply this in our lives? And so I was going to share with you the heart of that to the extent it's useful for you to think about in your own life. Are you seizing those moments that you actually have some control over, or are they passing by you even unnoticed? And so this is, I think, the crux of the work, frankly, that needs to be done. And I would characterize that as, on the one hand, this map gets read from the right to the left, and it maps that process of perception itself. And so yes, at any given time, we're taking in a staggering amount of information into our various five senses, but also through mental movement, right? It's not always stimuli that's coming from the outside. Sometimes, and a lot of times, it's coming from the inside in the form of thoughts and ideas and emotions and feelings and stories and you name it, right? And at that point, it goes to our brains, and in the process of information coming through our senses, it's imperfect. It's not complete information. If we saw what our eye actually sees, without, sort of that enhancement that our brain does, it has holes in it, actually. It's not perfect. And the same is true of all of the senses taking in information. So the brain is processing just the staggering amount of information. And in order to complete that picture, it's filling in the blanks. And what is it filling in the blanks with? It's filling in the blanks with our prior experiences, which in turn shape our expectations. There's kind of that bi-directional feedback loop that's happening at any given time. And that's where bias enters the picture, that unconscious bias piece. From there, we have our interpretation, right? It's how we make sense of our experience and our interpretive overlay, what I kind of term habits of mind as kind of a shorthand term. It's how we interpret what it is comes through our senses and or makes itself known within our kind of mental stream, like these thoughts that pop up or these ways that we feel throughout the day. And then finally, it's how we interpret that input that leads to what? How we respond, how we react, and what we think, say, and do, basically. And so those are the patterns that give rise to how we're showing up in the world day after day. And if you think about yourselves, for example, and the businesses that you're either engaged in now or starting or wanting to start, it turns out that matters. As a leader, you're going to always be on stage and people will be looking to you for the answers. They'll be looking, is this person predictable? Are they trustworthy? Right? They're going to be evaluating you. And so it's good to know, what is that delta between how I perceive myself and how others are perceiving me? And if we look at within this value stream, where is it that we actually have the capacity to have some influence? It's, where you see these bursts here between, on the one hand, when we perceive something and the sense we make of it, that's actually where there's an inflection point. And then again, between stimulus and response, right? How we interpret something before we say or do that thing that's going to cause us to show up in a particular kind of way in the world, right? So for me, this is the shorthand really for what it is we have agency over and how we can have agency over it. Looks like there might be a question. Let's see here. Bear with me. Yep, I don't know if you see the...
There's nothing in the chat as far as I can see.
Okay, sounds good. I might just be... Ah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. I think it's just a comment. And so if we look at... bear with me, wrong direction. So I mentioned before, what's the one thing that we always have access to? It's our awareness. And I think, honestly speaking, as boring as that might sound, it's actually one of the most thrilling things we can be thankful for, because it means at any given time where you're in a moment of either, not knowing which direction to go or where to seek that wisdom and knowing within yourself, it's right there. It's always right there. It's just a matter of remembering it and connecting to it and learning to engage with your own awareness, right? That's what makes our, that's sort of what makes us different from inanimate objects, presumably, is our ability to perceive and be aware of anything and everything that comes into our field of experience. And you can learn from that thing. And we already talked a little bit about the elements, right, of emotional intelligence and what it is we need to train in. The thing that I didn't say about these 3 elements are that we can actually develop these through certain practices. And if you'd like, we can either try it now or after we, if there are any more questions, I'll defer to all of you. But I guess the upshot is that we can learn these things, and they do absolutely have the capacity, these contemplative practices, whether it's, awareness of breath practice, which kind of falls into the category of attentional training, right? You're training your attention to focus. If it wanders off, you bring it back. And you have to have, of course, the level of self-awareness to know that your attention went somewhere in order to bring it back. There's body scan, which helps build our capacity for knowing how our emotions are manifesting as bodily signals, which is very helpful when it comes to being able to, for example, know, all right, I'm feeling upset now, or I'm feeling nervous, and be able to respond accordingly, right? And then finally, practices like open awareness, where you aren't necessarily placing your attention on, a traditional object as we would think about it, but you're actually having awareness itself as the object of focus, where you're not particularly honed in on a given thing. It's really just familiarizing yourself with that aspect of your own mind. And then finally, compassion practices like the Just Like Me practice, which is what I was going to share with you. But I defer to you in terms of when you'd like me to do that.
Yeah. How about you share with us, Michele, if that's okay?
Perfect. Let's do it. All right. So for this practice, what we're going to do is, if you're not seated, please do take a seat. And you can either close your eyes for this practice, or you may lower your gaze, or you can keep your eyes wide open. It depends on what's the most conducive for you. And I'll be guiding us through this, and I'm going to get us settled first before we do. Okay. So sitting comfortably, spine straight, kind of imagine yourself to be like a majestic mountain, right? You're very solid. Your feet are resting on the ground before you. And take a deep breath in. And as you do, pull in the strands of your attention, wherever that your attention might be at the moment. And as you breathe out, imagine releasing all you may be holding on to, letting any thoughts, emotions, or worries that may be present dissipate. And you can imagine them dispersing like clouds, scattering and dissolving into the sky. And as you take another deep breath in, Imagine the air that fills your lungs anchors your attention, and you can fill your body with your own awareness of this moment. Just notice what it's like to be present. And as you breathe out, let go of any remnants of mind's movement and let your attention gently settle and grow clear, like a crystal clear mountain lake. All right. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to imagine everybody on this call and beyond, whether they're people you know or not, and we're going to do a practice that's called Just Like Me. And I would like you to think these things to yourself silently as you visualize not just the people on this call, but really quite broadly, okay? So these people standing before me have a body and a mind just like me. They have feelings, emotions, and thoughts just like me. They've experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering just like me. And at some point, they've been sad, disappointed, angry, or hurt just like me. They may have felt unworthy or inadequate just like me. And they worry and they're frightened sometimes just like I am. They've longed for friendship and they're learning about life just like me. They want to be caring and kind to others just like I do. And they want to be content with what life has given them. They wish to be free from pain and suffering just like me. And they wish to be safe and healthy just like me. They yearn for happiness and wishes to be loved just like me. And allowing well-being and loving kindness to arise within yourself, extend to everybody the following wishes. I wish you to have the strength and the resources and the support you need to navigate the difficulties in your life with ease. And imagine sending out just rays of good wishes and kindness to people everywhere. And further wish them to be free from pain and suffering. Wish them to be peaceful and happy. And wish for them to be loved because they are a fellow human being, just like me. So taking a deep breath in and out. Now I'd like you to turn your focus to yourself. And I want you to visualize yourself, really picture yourself in your mind's eye, and silently repeat the following to yourself. Even though I may at times feel tired and exhausted by the hardships life brings, even though I am not as I would always wish myself to be, and even though I may at times feel hope-free, I know at my core I am love. And like all beings, I'm worthy of love, and I'm worthy of joy and happiness. And it's from this place of knowing my own worth and my own dignity and my desire to lead a meaningful life that I bring joy to myself and others, and that I find and return to myself again and again. And then taking a deep breath in and exhaling, imagine sending yourself rays of love and kindness as you say to yourself, may I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May I be safe and healthy and live a life of ease and well-being. And just take a deep breath in and out. Just let that rest for a moment before we come back to center together. Just let all of that resonate. And you can open your eyes when you're ready. I don't know if any of you have done that practice before, but I'd be curious to hear how to go.
Yep.
I do see.
Right.
Go ahead, yep.
Into your chat. Into the chat, one word about how you're feeling right now. If anybody wants to share, you can just raise your hand, go into participants, and I can call you up. Isabel says, loving.
Nice.
Released and full of love, wrote Sasha. Valentine says, love. Relaxed, from John.
Nice.
It feels light and create a sense of belonging, Shabistan.
Nice.
Relaxed and light. Yeah, it seems to be working, right? Michelle and I'd be super curious, and that's again the rational part of you wanting to understand everything on an intellectual level. How, have these kinds of practices that you integrate into your trainings helped leaders and organizations change? How long does such a journey take in general? How much time and efforts do I have to put into acquiring or training habits of mind?
Yeah, great question. Yep. So, I don't know about all of the ventures that you all are involved in or would like to be involved in, but I suspect that many of you care a lot about business as an agent of world benefit. I'm just guessing, I could be wrong. But when you really look at what does that mean, it means that we actually also need to be kind to each other. We can wish great things for the world, but on a very practical level, if there's some aspect of ourselves or who we are that's still rough around the edges in the day-to-day aspects of our lives. So for example, we all have, people who rub us the wrong way, or who maybe cause us to, something they say or do triggers us. And so a measure of being able to say, okay, is this practice I'm trying working? Am I kinder? Am I softer? When I come to those moments of being triggered, in reality, not just conceptually, am I behaving any differently? And so to answer your question, Yip, doing practices like this is building our muscle, so to say, to think about those around us, both the people we know as well as the people we don't know, in a different kind of way. We're building that muscle to care beyond just the people who are in our in-group or our tribe, right? Or ourselves. And it's not like you could do this practice once and then just sort of think, okay, it's all okay now. So I personally think it's a lifetime. I mean, for me, in my case, it takes, practice in earnest over meaningful periods of time to actually become softer. At least, and I'll admit I'm kind of incorrigible to begin with, but I still have a lot of work to do. Is the upshot. I don't know if that got at the heart of your question, but I think the work is always, it always continues. And I think because our basic human nature, if we think about that value stream map, we're always in a position, fortunately or unfortunately, where we've got the subject-object duality set up with how we perceive reality. And so, in terms of our habits of mind, as long as we are taking in information and having to process and interpret it, which is presumably most of our waking hours, then we always have a job to do. There's always work to be done relative to those habits of mind and how we're reacting and responding and interpreting. So.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see a direct impact of kindness our or on practicing the capacity to be more kind in our daily business decisions? Would it would, you know, give away more credits or be less upset when somebody doesn't pay back what I gave them as a service or something, or, you know, what
Yeah.
actually to be more kind?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because, you know, we're all faced, I mean, just again, just as someone has been part of the startup for the last 5 years, oh my goodness, I had no idea what I was in for. How much I would learn about myself and about others, and, you know, how is it that I want to behave in moments where, for example, somebody doesn't come through the way you expect them to, or, you know, maybe there's even a disagreement about a contract or whatever the case may be, or you have clients who aren't happy with your services, or, you know, people who don't follow through. And I think it's, you know, in those moments, for me anyway, what it comes down to on a practical level is assessing first, what is it that I have influence over, you know, in a given situation? And 9 times out of 10, what you have influence over is your response, in how you choose to respond, as well as how you choose to internalize and make sense of what's just happened. And that's where a practice like this can come in handy. Because if you think about it, part of this practice really was helping us understand that, just like us, everybody else is coming at things from their own subjective point of view, and probably thinking, hey, I'm in the clear here. You know, I'm honoring my agreements, you know, or my intentions are good. In the same way we think that about ourselves. And so usually, you know, sort of the magic is somewhere in realizing, okay, maybe this isn't so personal, feels quite personal, can feel quite personal, but even just that step of detaching, you know, one's own perception that this is all revolving around me very personally, right, is a good first step. It's where do I have give in this situation? Is there a conversation that can be had? And if not, then how is it that I'm going to decide to feel about it? And what am I going to do relative to those feelings? What is it that I'm going to either think, say, or do, which sometimes is nothing, and sometimes it's something. But being able to just have that perspective that goes outside of one's own, you know, kind of immediate frame of reference, which is always sort of subject-object duality, and knowing that that's the perspective everybody else is coming from too.
Thanks. So when I upset, what do I do in being a good practitioner?
You know, I think that's really what it means to work with your habits of mind. And I think if that starts with knowing what happens to you when you're upset. So the first question is, do you notice when you're upset? And when you're upset, do you notice what's that constellation of things that's happening on a psychophysical level within you? So that you're like, oh, that's its signature. Then I know it's coming up. Then you're like, okay, it's here now. Now what am I going to do? So in that moment, I think, you know, there's no sort of one, I think, panacea. If it is, we'd always just apply it, wouldn't we? So I think in terms of working with your habits of mind, and you have to try a lot of different things, I think. And so sometimes it could be that just taking 3 deep breaths is enough to give you the distance from whatever has upset you, that you could think clearly enough to say, okay, what are my values here? And how can I react in a way that's reflective of those values? That's one thing, right? Just getting enough space and distance to be able to behave in a way that's in alignment with how you want to show up. But if the 3 breaths doesn't work, okay, then maybe you actually need to sit and practice a little bit, or you may need to take space and sort of think through, okay, this is the story I'm telling myself, for example, and understand that it's your story. And being able, for example, to be able to see from multiple other angles, to think, okay, I wonder what their perspective is. And being able to sort of see something from a different vantage point is another strategy. Ultimately, even if you can't, for example, know, because we can never really know what's in somebody else's mind. So then we have a few options. We can either talk to them about it, or we can either get to a place where we're okay not knowing, but we're giving them the benefit of the doubt anyway. Because if you don't give them the benefit of the doubt, that's okay too, but just know then you have to sit with that, and you probably still have some action to take there, right? Either, okay, I need follow-up here, or I'm going to keep sort of perseverating on how I feel about this situation, which is again where our ability to be able to let go comes back to our resilience. And so the training that's needed to be able to let go when you're clinging to something is in fact built when you do these kinds of compassion practices, or even, for example, attentional training. Like if you think about, if you're focusing on your breath and something pulls your attention away, you're like, oh, I'm distracted, come back here, right? So it's that practice of letting go and letting go and letting go. But ultimately, you need to iron it. And there are lots of methods to figure that out. And often, I think working with a coach can be helpful, because you can start to develop some actual strategies for situations that you find are coming up again and again.
Thanks. So I would love to give the word to Olivia from Austin. Olivia, would you mind asking your question? To unmute yourself and ask the question, or do you want me to just read it out?
Yes, I can ask it.
Hi.
I hope it's not too. Hi, how's it going?
Good.
So yeah, I was born and raised a missionary, and we were volunteers, and so I started fundraising really young, but it was always for the community, for the benefit of everybody. And then I recently this year I founded a nonprofit called the Activation Project, and we help people to recover from trauma caused that in childhood, adverse childhood experiences. And I recently went to a training, it's an NLP timeline therapy training, and they just were hammering me about how the fact that I started a nonprofit and all of this was money blocks that I had, and it was like that and I think part of it is the fact that I do have trouble asking for things for myself and receiving like financial abundance for me. Like it's easier for me like to fundraise for the good of other people and to help other people, because my greatest desire is to be of service. And I guess my question is, how can we like live a life of service, and giving back, but also allow abundance into our life and not have these, like, what is your view as far as like money blocks and like making money for ourselves and giving it to others,
Great question. Great question. So that's a great question. And I'm thinking about it, Olivia, from a few different standpoints. One, I can say for myself, one of the reasons I stayed in corporate America so very long is because I was actually afraid. I was actually afraid of what would happen when I left the security of a pretty, well-paying job. And I see that as being kind of my own, what I like to say, head trash about money and about fear and about what I'm capable of. And so when I apply that to kind of what you've shared, what little you've shared, we each have operative within us certain ideas about ourselves moving through the world. And sometimes those ideas actually can take on a life and momentum of their own and truly have impact. And so I think that this takes the form, for example, of, if you reinforce certain beliefs you have, whether they're conscious or unconscious, about yourself and or others, then in many respects, you are limiting yourself to those set of stories or beliefs, and then they're not serving you well potentially, right? I don't know the extent of your belief and to what degree you're actually tied in with that, or if that's just what other people are telling you. And so I think that's very ripe for work with a coach, to be honest. And what a coach would do with you is help you explore, to what degree is this getting in the way in real terms? Or to what degree are you willing to shift away from that thought? Is it true? And if it's not true, then what is true? What would you like to be true? What's a healthier way to think about what you're engaged in that's actually conducive to creating the conditions for those things to arise. So beliefs are quite powerful, especially if we reinforce them again and again, even if, you know, this is sort of the place where what we think to ourselves again and again, what we say to ourselves matters, right? Right. That's kind of that self-talk and how you're thinking of your capacity and potential. It does matter because it influences the choices you're going to make and how you're going to show up when you make them. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I think, but what you're talking about usually requires quite a bit of investigation into your own thinking and starting from that place of what are my habits of mind? What is it that I do again and again in terms of how I interpret my own experience? And then in turn, what do I do with those interpretations? How does that translate to my day-to-day behavior and how I'm showing up in my own life and with other people? And that's the whole crux of what I think good coaching is about.
We also have the exercises from week 2 are about, or week 1 and week 2 are about identifying the habits of mind and how to interpret them. So you could go back to the course material and do the exercises.
That's a great question. Thank you, Olivia. And then I was just reading what Petra wrote.
Yes, reading it out to everybody. She loves the practice because she always wonders how more connectedness and could be created within a group of people who don't know each other in person, like in our master's program, for example. And we have to create something like this new way of interacting due to more absolute virtuality she feels. So thank you, Michele, for helping us building bonds within the masterclass participants.
My pleasure.
Michael is asking, what key pieces of advice have helped you go to where you are today?
Yeah, great question. You know, it's funny, I really haven't had that many mentors in my life. And I don't know what that is a function of per se. So I would say that the best advice that I've consistently taken into kind of my experience or my practice is really from my spiritual tradition and from my teacher, having attended many teachings over the years. And so I would say there are many core Buddhist practices that I come back to again and again. And I think the crux of that advice is, you know, what is it that you actually can control, you know, and tuning out the noise on the things that you can't actually control and developing within oneself the proficiency needed to be able to show up fully in your own potential and in your own life in ways that are consistently going to serve you well and others well, you know, presuming that what you're engaged in is for the benefit of others. Yeah. You know, in the corporate world, which I spent a lot of time in, there was a lot of advice from an informal standpoint of, you know, things that work or things that work better or less well. And in the space of conflict management, I would say the one takeaway lesson I've learned again and again is when it comes to difficult conversations that need to be had, you really should pick up the phone or visit with someone in person. Don't try to do that over email. Like it just always backfires, basically, I find. And, you know, one's comfort with conflict will have a lot to do with what your go-to will be in that regard. So if your instinct is, oh, I've got a difficult conversation, I'm just going to type this email here. Probably don't. You know, pick up the phone instead and have that conversation. Or, I mean, that's the world we're all living in now, right? A lot of us can't go see each other, but you know, someday when the outer conditions permit, that's usually best is in person. Yeah, that human connection.
If you had an example from your own personal story about, you know, where you maybe were not able yet to stand up or show up in the way you wanted to show up,
Yeah.
how would you do it differently today? Now knowing all of, like, having done the practice.
Yeah, that's a super great question. And I'm still kind of grappling with, you know, a particular situation that I'll describe, which is this. I don't know that I have a better answer, but I have at least identified it as a problem point, or one that is a bit of a conundrum for me, and maybe you all can help me. When I started this venture 5 years ago of creating the suite of products that has now become GolemanEI, we did so with zero startup capital. And I've got to say that that's hard. Nor did we go for any funding, nor have we. I'm not saying we'd be opposed to it, but we haven't yet. And so we were working with what we had to work with, which was our own knowledge, our creativity, and our just kind of determination to get it done. And in that process, while we were and have been and still are benefiting, I think, many people from the programs, we ourselves have suffered a fair bit, actually. And my own team has been the recipients of the stresses that go along with being an entrepreneur in a startup. And I have to say that that's been, for me, the most difficult part of my job as a CEO, to witness that and to know that that's happening and not really know what to do about it, because I felt that the parameters that I have had to work with have just, they've been what they are by and large. And so while that was okay for me and a handful of the team that was used to like working it, because we come from a generation where you just do that. And my own work ethic from my upbringing, I come from on one side of my family, the Mexican side, is we were migrant laborers. You know, my grandparents came from Texas, and that's what they did. They went to school through the 3rd grade and the 8th grade, and they just worked like hell to get stuff done. So that's kind of my spirit on some level. That doesn't work for everybody, and it's not kind at some point. At some point, that's not kind. So that's the crux of my dilemma. I will say that I think COVID has provided a little bit of a respite and breathing time for us to really reflect and think, how is it that we also want to be in the world while we're doing this good work? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't kill us too? So that's a perennial issue. It's a real leadership issue, I think.
Thanks. So maybe one question regarding emotional intelligence and its relation towards other forms of intelligence.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that I'm heavily influenced by kind of my Buddhist training, I have to say. So you'll probably get the answer from that angle. I tend to think of knowing as 2 different kinds of ways of knowing. There's conceptual understanding, which is intellectual. It's being able to conceive of something, you know, with your intellect. And then there's experiential understanding. And that's the kind that most of us don't develop much of, because our entire education system and ways of learning don't really have that built in so well. And so I think that's the most important way to learn things. I think partly because of, you know, of course, we all need to sort of build a kind of baseline level of capacity, both technically as well as just being on this earth. But the truth is, once you've gotten that core training, you know, there's not so much that differentiates us. And so it's often that experiential understanding of the things that cause us to be meaningfully different, or at our best, that I think is one kind of intelligence that we would do well to work on throughout our lives, and just know that that is something we have to carve out time for, or it will never happen. You know, because we'll always defer to the reading the book or understanding something intellectually or having a conversation about it versus sitting on a cushion and spending time with your own mind. That's truly difficult for me anyway. I'll speak for myself. So.
So I want to wrap up with the last question, and that again maybe is linking back to what you said earlier when you kicked off GolemanEI at a conference at United Nations where you talked about emotional intelligence in AI. And since we are all working, you know, at the frontiers of disruptive technology right now, maybe comparable to the internet in 1995, what is it that each of us needs to bring into this new world that we are creating, or that technology is creating with us, so that we can have a happy, sustainable, healthy future?
So there's so much to be said, so I'll try to be succinct in my response with the main points. First and foremost, I think as humans, what we are not built to do so well, just by our design, is second, third, fourth, fifth order thinking, or logic, or all the rest. And what I mean by that is that we often don't conceptualize the consequences and impacts in a very kind of with magnitude at the level that we actually need to be able to see what we're doing and how it impacts at a profound level, this sort of ripple effect, so to say. And it's a quick way to put sort of cause and effect into view. And so with things like AI, if we're not thinking about the unintended consequences, we could have very beneficial things in mind that turn out to just not be so. And so that's the first thing. Second thing is, we have to be really careful, I think, to make sure that to whatever degree, for example, we're trying to build emotional intelligence into AI, that we make sure we're bringing our understanding along quickly enough with the science, because I'm not sure we do understand so much about emotions in the brain. There's kind of a traditional classic view, and then there's the work of Lisa Barrett-Feldman, or Feldman-Barrett, I can't remember. How Emotions Are Made is the book she has written, that takes a little bit different view than the classical view. And so where emotions aren't quite as straightforward as we think they are. So if we're building that technology in, then we better make sure that we are doing it well in a way that it will have the ability to have a positive impact, I guess is my point.
Thank you so much for sharing your advice and life hacks with us. And I hope we can use these insights and build our enterprises and blockchain technologies in a way that serves society. Before I let you all go, I would love for you to click on the survey link. It's only like a 2-minute survey that helps us understand better how to, you know, create these learning sessions week by week that serve you better on your learning journey. And I
thank you, everybody.
Just this, you can also use this to go on menti.com and type in the code 2572745 and just fill this once you leave, like when we end our meeting together. Take your time, and we're going to share with Michele, you know, your nice words of thanks to her too. So would appreciate if you filled the survey.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michele. Have a wonderful day ahead of you.
You too. Be well. Bye-bye now.
Ready?